before the soldiers do. Sarah Edmondson is standing at the window of her farmhouse in Gordon County, Georgia, watching a column of dark shapes move across the November landscape. She is 26 years old. Her husband Daniel left for the Confederate Army 19 months ago. She has received 4 letters from him since. The last one arrived in August. It said he was alive, that he loved her, that he would come home when the war ended. The war has not ended. The war has come to her instead. She counts the soldiers as they approach. 12 men, maybe 15, moving in a loose formation that suggests they are not regular army. They are carrying torches. One of them is leading a mule that pulls a cart already loaded with what looks like furniture, fabric, items that belonged to someone else before this morning. Sarah's nearest neighbor is the Hartwell farm, 3 miles east. The smoke she sees rising behind the soldiers is coming from that direction. She is alone. Her farmhand, a freedman named Thomas, who stayed after emancipation because he had nowhere else to go, left yesterday to find food in town. Her sister-in-law, Martha, who had been staying with her, rode to Atlanta 2 weeks ago to find news of her own husband. She has not returned. The farmhouse contains Sarah, her stored provisions, her husband's hunting rifle that she does not know how to fire, and approximately 14 minutes before the soldiers reach her door. She knows what foraging parties do. Everyone in Georgia knows. They take food, livestock, valuables, anything that might support the Confederate war effort, or simply anything they want. The newspapers call it requisitioning. The women who survive it call it something else, something they whisper to each other in church pews and quilting circles, something they do not write in letters because letters can be intercepted. Sarah has heard the whispers. She has heard about the Thornton farm in Jasper County, where a foraging party stayed for 3 days. She has heard about what happened to Mrs. Thornton and her 2 adult daughters during those 3 days. She has heard that Mrs. Thornton does not speak anymore, that she sits by her window and watches the road and does not respond when people say her name. The soldiers are closer now. She can see their faces. They are young, most of them. Boys who might have been handsome before the war, made them into something else. They are laughing about something. One of them points at her house. Sarah considers her options. She can run. The woods behind the farm are dense enough to hide in, and she knows them well. But running means abandoning everything she and Daniel built, everything they own, the house where they expected to raise children. Running means confirming that she is prey, triggering the chase instinct that she can see even from this distance in the way the men move. She can hide. The root cellar beneath the kitchen has a concealed entrance that Daniel installed 2 years ago, when rumors of raids first began. But hiding means hoping they do not find her, hoping they leave quickly, hoping for mercy from men who have already burned the Hartwell farm. She can stay visible, meet them at the door, offer them food, cooperation, whatever they want that does not involve her body. Hope that daylight and her dignity and the pretense of civilized behavior will protect her from what happens when pretense fails. She has approximately 8 minutes now. The hunting rifle is in the bedroom closet, unloaded, with ammunition in a box on the top shelf. Daniel showed her once how to load it, how to aim, how to brace for the kick. She remembers almost nothing of what he said. She remembers only his hands on hers, guiding the barrel, his voice calm and patient, his certainty that she would never actually need to use it. 6 minutes. The soldiers have reached the fence line. The man in front, the one who pointed, is older than the others. His uniform is officer's rank, but his bearing suggests authority earned through violence rather than promotion. He is looking at the house with an expression that Sarah recognizes from somewhere deep in her memory, from some ancient part of her brain that knows what predators look like when they have found prey. She makes her decision. What you are about to learn has been systematically excluded from American history textbooks for over 150 years. The official narrative of Sherman's march to the sea describes property destruction, barns burned, railroads torn up, livestock slaughtered. The economic infrastructure of the Confederacy dismantled through total war. The textbooks acknowledged that civilians suffered, that homes were destroyed, that the march was brutal by the standards of its time. The textbooks do not describe what happened to the women. Tonight, I will show you the evidence that survived, despite systematic suppression, the diaries that families hid for generations before donating them to archives with restrictions on access, the letters that officers wrote acknowledging what they could not control, the court-martial records that reveal how rarely soldiers were punished and for what mild offenses, while far worse, went completely unaddressed. You will learn about the foraging parties, small groups of soldiers sent ahead of the main army to requisition supplies from farms where only women remained. You will learn about the bummer squads, the lawless raiders who followed Sherman's army and operated with complete impunity. You will learn about the unwritten policy that made officers complicit through deliberate ignorance. You will learn why the women never reported what happened, why families maintained silence for generations, why the truth was buried so effectively that most Americans today have no idea what Sherman's march actually involved. You will learn what the phrase, "passed her to the regiment," meant in the winter of 1864, why it appeared in soldiers' letters home, in court-martial testimony, in the private writings of men who witnessed things they could not forget. What happened to women whose husbands and fathers were away fighting, whose farms lay in the path of 60,000 Union soldiers moving through Georgia with minimal supervision and maximum impunity? If you want to understand the real history that comfortable narratives conceal, subscribe now and comment below telling me where in the world you are watching from, because these women existed. Their suffering was documented by the very men who inflicted it, and for 150 years, their stories have been deliberately erased from the version of history we teach our children. Sarah Edmondson is standing at her window with approximately 4 minutes remaining. Let me tell you what happens when the soldiers reach her door. Sherman's march to the sea began on the 15th of November 1864, when 62,000 Union soldiers departed Atlanta and began moving toward Savannah, 300 miles to the southeast. The strategy was unprecedented in American warfare. Sherman's army would cut itself off from supply lines, living entirely off the land, consuming or destroying everything in its path. The goal was not merely military victory. The goal was the destruction of Southern civilian morale, the demonstration that the Confederacy could not protect its own territory, the breaking of the will to continue fighting. Sherman articulated this philosophy in correspondence that historians have studied extensively. "We are not only fighting hostile armies, but a hostile people," he wrote, "and must make old and young, rich and poor, feel the hard hand of war." The hard hand of war fell primarily on women. By November 1864, most able-bodied white men in Georgia were serving in the Confederate Army. The farms and plantations that Sherman's army moved through were occupied by women, children, elderly men, and enslaved people who were in the process of becoming free, but who often had nowhere to go. When foraging parties arrived, they typically encountered households with no male protectors, no weapons, no ability to resist. The official orders regarding foraging were specific, but selectively enforced. Soldiers were authorized to gather food, livestock, and supplies necessary for the army's sustenance. They were prohibited from entering private dwellings without officer supervision. They were forbidden from violence against civilians. These prohibitions existed on paper. They rarely existed in practice. The army moved in multiple columns, spread across a front 60 miles wide. Communication between units was limited. Officers could not supervise every foraging party, and many officers chose not to try. The practical reality was that groups of armed men ranged across the Georgia countryside with minimal oversight, encountering isolated women who had no recourse and no protection. Sherman himself acknowledged the situation in letters that were not published during his lifetime. "I know that in the beginning, I too had the old West Point notion that pillaging was a disgrace," he wrote to a fellow general, "but I am satisfied that the soldiers cannot be kept from it." In another letter, he admitted that soldiers are entitled to enjoy all spoils of war. The word spoils carried implications that Sherman did not specify, but that soldiers understood. The Army's provost marshal, responsible for military discipline, recorded a total of 17 courts-martial for crimes against civilians during the entire March to the Sea. 17 cases across 62,000 soldiers over 37 days, affecting hundreds of thousands of civilians. The charges in these 17 cases were predominantly theft and destruction of property. Only 2 involved violence against persons. Neither of those 2 resulted in serious punishment. The absence of prosecution was the policy. The silence was the system. The man at Sarah's door does not knock. He pushes it open with one boot, his rifle held casually, his eyes moving through the interior of the farmhouse with the efficiency of someone who has done this many times. He is Sergeant William Kearns, 41 years old, a veteran of Shiloh and Chickamauga, who has spent the last 3 weeks leading what the Army officially calls a foraging detail, and what the men themselves call something else. He sees Sarah standing in the center of the main room, her hands visible and empty, her posture communicating submission that she hopes will be interpreted as cooperation rather than weakness. "How many others in the house?" His voice is flat, procedural. This is a question he asks at every farm. "I'm alone." Kearns studies her face for signs of deception. He has learned to read women during these weeks, to identify when they are hiding husbands in root cellars or sons in barn lofts. He sees no deception in Sarah's expression. He sees only fear, which is what he expects to see, what he has seen at every farm since Atlanta. Husband? Serving, 43rd Georgia Infantry. The information means nothing to Kearns beyond confirming what he already assumed. The men are gone. The women are here. The arithmetic of occupation remains consistent across every county they have passed through. "We're requisitioning supplies," he says. "Food, livestock, anything of military value. You can cooperate or you can resist. Cooperation goes easier." Sarah nods. She has rehearsed this moment in her mind for months, imagining what she